Ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to the Frederick County Public Schools Finance Committee meeting budget work session, Monday, February 12th, 2024. The time now is 6:15 and I now call this meeting to order. It looks like we have an agenda before us. May I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I make a motion to approve the agenda, Madam Chair.
Second.
And any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
And the motion passes. And Ms. Dr. Hummer, I'll turn it over to you and your team.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair, so much. We have a couple items for you this evening. We are going to review the board member questions that have come forward. Please continue to send those forward. Even if there's additional questions after today, we want to make sure that we are answering all of your questions and you all are fully informed as we move throughout this budget process. Then we are going to break down the last components of my needs-based budget that I presented to you a couple weeks ago. We are going to talk about the baseline budget as well as the CEP. So we have Mrs. Curry here as well as some others that will be presenting that information to you. We also have the transportation requests as well as the safety and security request as well. We are going to break down the school nutrition fund in addition to the CEP provision as well. We also have a contract award for the Siemens Industries, and that is going to be an item that we would like to go to the full board for approval, and then we're going to break down the budget calendar for you all as well. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Mrs. Anderson, and we'll go from there. Thank you.
All right, so we'll start off with addressing your questions from our last meeting. The first question is, why are teachers leaving FCPS? And you can see the data there on the screen.
Your mic's not hot.
Yeah.
The mic working?
Your mic's not hot.
It's not on? Maybe it's me. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so you can see the data there that was taken from our voluntary separation form, starting back to July up to today. The next question, what is the cost of providing all classified staff with 25 years or more, $3,000 in additional pay, and you can see that cost there. And then Mr. Bell, to address your question about the cost to commute to Loudoun County. So you can see some data there where we took 4 points of location across Loudoun County. And you can see how we arrived at the mileage dollars as well as the time. But to put it into context, we made an example of a teacher with 15 years of experience. Their salary with us, or the difference in the salary between us and Loudoun County, less taxes, less the fuel if they were going to Sterling, and that would be the difference in net pay. And as you can see, it's hard to put a dollar value on time.
Sure.
Does that answer your question? Is that what you were looking for?
Yes, I think so. Thank you very much. Although I did read something about, I'll have to wait. I found something about how to put a dollar value to time, actually. There's actually a general equation. It's kind of cool, actually.
Okay.
I'm severely underpaid. But anyway, so when I come up with that, I'll send it your way.
Sounds great.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. All right, so that closes the questions and answers part. So now we're going to get into the baseline budget changes. So the baseline budget, when we talk about the baseline budget, it represents what our costs are to continue current operations in the next school year. So it's before additional items that are proposed by the superintendent. So we wanted to highlight some of the significant changes in our cost to continue for next year. You heard in the presentation that we had our departments go through their budget allocations and come back to us with recommendations of where reductions could be made. So that effort resulted in $485,000 savings for next year. And then you can see a $1.6 million increase, and that's the school division's contribution to health insurance. We are not recommending to pass on an increase on the share that the employees pay, rather that the school division is going to take care of that increase for them. And then lastly, we have a big $9 million reduction in our baseline budget because of expiring federal dollars as a result of the elementary and secondary school emergency relief funds expiring. So if there are no questions about the baseline budget, we'll move into the school nutrition services and CEP. Mrs. Martin?
Yes, the insurance increase of 10%, is this like, well, I don't want to say normal, but is it like acceptable? I mean, who do we have insurance with?
I'm sorry.
Why have they gone up this much?
Yeah, we had a 10% increase this year as well. So this 10% increase that we're proposing for next year it's I guess we're expecting it because of what we're seeing with our claims expense. So this 10% increase just on the school's share. So employees are not going to see a 10% increase, but the schools are going to contribute 10% more on their behalf for health insurance.
Mrs. Martin, are you asking if this is standard for it to be?
Standard,
Yes.
that's a good
Standard.
Yes, I think she's asking if this is standard for this to increase every year, because this is now 2 years in a row that this has increased. Is this pretty typical?
It is typical for our health insurance to increase each year. We did have a couple of years where it did not, but in recent years it has. Yeah, and it's based upon the actual health and dental claims that we're experiencing. We are a self-funded insurance plan. So, does that help?
Madam Chair? If I may, having dealt with this with the county, if someone, let's say our employee has a catastrophic health situation, whatever, it's going to increase those funds. That happened in Frederick County as well. My question, what are they paying, what does an employee pay for health coverage?
It depends on the plan and the number of dependents that they have on their plan.
On average, if it was, let's just say, spouse or employee and dependent, what are they paying?
I don't have those numbers with me, but I'm certainly happy to get that information to you.
All right.
Sorry, I'm crunchy.
Just a quick question. I know you said it was self-funded. Okay, I understand what that means. Is there any kind of shopping around for the fiduciary for that? For the company that, how often do we go shop around, if you will?
Anthem is our health insurance provider, and Delta is our dental provider, and it's a three-year contract with plus 2 one-year renewals after that. So then at that point, it goes through a competitive solicitation process.
Where are we with this current plan, with this current contract?
We just started it, didn't we? We're in our first year. Yeah.
Yeah. Sure.
We are in our 3 years, so we're ending that this summer, but we're talking about going out again. So we are looking to go out this summer and look for rates, because sometimes that's how you get the best deal. So we're looking at that as well as our clinic. We're trying to look at all the different things we can to see where we can cut price. So self-funded, and back to Mrs. Martin, this is normal because health insurance rates are going, medical is going up. So this is kind of a reflection of what's happening out in the public. But also, remember, 3 years ago, we until this year, so 3 years prior, we decreased rates and then held them steady. So this year in 25 or 24, this is the first time we've raised in 3 years. So that's kind of a nice thing. We've been able to keep those rates down for our employees. And then Dr. Hummer, in his budget presentation, wanted to hold the rates the same this year for next year so they don't incur that cost. So we're going to see probably the following year, we may see an increase there, but it depends on how much money is going into the fund, because it's made up of our payments as the employer and the employees. And back to Mr. Sturdivant's question, we pay a different percentage on different levels. So for the employee, I think it's around 65% roughly. And for families where it's higher, we pay a higher percentage in order to keep those rates low. But we can certainly get those rates for you. And we have two different plans. We have a high deductible plan, and then we have a Key Care 25 plan, which less money, that pays more toward the health insurance. But we also give a side of the high deductible. We give $1,000 to each employee who takes the high deductible plan into an HSA. So we try to encourage both ways. Probably more than you wanted, so I'm going to step away now.
Actually don't,
Oh, okay.
Madam Chair. My question is, and this is a sort of what if, there was all that imbroglio between the hospital and Anthem, and if, so is that a concern, or should it be a concern of ours moving forward? Because essentially Winchester Medical is the only medical center around.
Yeah, we worry about that as well. But last year, or this current fall, they just signed a 5-year agreement.
So it's for
we'll
5
be
years,
safe for at
okay.
least 5 years. But we did look at that last year when they were in negotiations. So we were happy to see the 5-year. That kind of put some calming effect on the whole health, the Anthem versus Winchester Medical Center.
Something to consider when we shop around, then, not to
Most
get
definitely we
into
do.
a 5-year plan or whatever. Thank you.
Have you ever considered having two different insurance plans? Can you do that?
For health
Two
insurance,
different companies?
usually when you buy in bulk, it gets cheaper. So when we say that, if we stay with one vendor, because all of our employees would fall underneath that, we would get better pricing than if we split it to two different health insurance plan, two different companies to do that health insurance plan. But now we do have a separate for eye, and we have a separate for dental. But medical is under one.
Okay,
We try to look at everything to get the best pricing.
I'm sure.
Yeah, it's a challenge.
Thank you.
All right, so if there are no other questions about the baseline budget, I'll advance it to Mrs. Curry for nutrition.
I have one.
Okay.
The previous one, it says a $9 million reduction in restricted state and federal grants because of the ESER funds. Is that how, ESER or ESSER?
ESSER dollars.
I always say it
COVID
wrong.
dollars, yeah.
How did that come about to begin with? Wasn't that during COVID? And I mean, should that even be considered a reduction? Because it was just a gimme, so to speak, and now we're going to consider
Yeah,
it
but
a
we
reduction?
account for those dollars, and then once those dollars are spent or go away, we have to subtract them from the federal dollars that we've been receiving.
It was kind of like a lotto ticket. Bad
Yeah, yeah.
example. But you see what I'm saying? Why we even consider it as a, I mean, I understand it's going to be a reduction from what we had, but it's not something that,
So those are reimbursement dollars that we've received, and when we don't receive those dollars, we
we're
don't
not gonna
account for
receive
those
them
dollars.
anymore.
Correct.
That's right. I understand that. Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you.
Well, it's a pleasure to speak to the board tonight about the nutrition program and the CEP. So the first thing we will discuss is how we avoid waste. The first thing that we're going to talk about is the use of non-disposable trays. So we are using those in our cafeterias. There are some emergency situations where we would have to use disposable, such as if we have a dish machine that has went down, or if we have a significant labor shortage. We do use subs, so those should be pretty minimal. Another way that we reduce our waste is by using production records. Those are pretty standard amongst food service operations. What we do is we can compare our prediction to our actual numbers. So to put that in perspective, if you're looking at you're serving 100 slices of cheese pizza, the first cycle of the menu, and our kids surprise us and they select 125, then that becomes our base for the next time we run that cycle. We also do batch cooking, and what that means is we don't prepare everything right at the start at 11 a.m. We do that throughout the meal service so that the students who come in at 11 will get the same quality as the students who come in at 12:30, so that we know if we have an item, let's say it's chicken parmesan, and it's really selling that day, we may need to increase our production. Some of our outreach programs, we attend open houses or back-to-school nights to help parents with the application process. At the beginning of the year, applications are included in our student packets that go home with the students. We do have paper copies that are readily available. Also, we have devices that parents can complete the application online. Our applications are provided in English and Spanish. We also have interpreters available. And we promote the information and application on our website and social media. As far as qualifying for those free or reduced meals, you can see the income chart here for year 23-24. And if you look at a household size of 4, the most someone can make to receive free or reduced meals is $55,500. That's gross. If it's $55,501, you are not eligible. So our current bad debt is about $128,000 currently. We anticipate that to reach about $150,000. We do not turn away any student if they come up to get a meal. We also do not give them a separate meal, how they did in years ago. I think that they would provide a cheese sandwich for a student. We don't do that. So what happens is that student will get that meal, and it is charged to their account, which increases the bad debt. The bad debt, it must be written off as an operating loss and may not be absorbed by the nonprofit school food service account. So whenever we look at the balances to write off, we look at those seniors, we prioritize them, because once they leave the division, we know that would be a very difficult expense to get back. The next, any student who's been approved for free or reduced lunch throughout the school year, we look at that debt that they incurred before they had that approval. And then any families who have encountered a hardship, such as a death of a family member, lost their jobs, or something similar.
Madam
Yes.
Chair,
Yes.
can you go back a slide? So, all of that being said, if there's those that just don't pay,
Correct.
and we're not sending collection agents out after them, are we? Or putting them in collections?
No.
Okay, thank you.
We do send emails every Wednesday to family members, to the guardians, to inform them of the debt. In the past, we had done phone calls, but what we noticed was that a lot of people would change phone numbers. We may not have the most current number, and the emails seem to be more effective. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. I think, I don't know every situation, but I know just this week, someone who works in this building is having a hardship and asked me, what are some options? It's probably something temporary for them. And I think a lot of people think that, this debt is incurred by people who maybe aren't in the workforce, but that's not always true. We have people who are working, it's a two-income family, and they're trying to make ends meet just as anyone else. And I look at that chart and I look at, $55,500 for a family of 4. And again, those are gross wages. How do you spread it? How do you make it work?
Thank you. It seems very time-consuming for your staff.
It can be.
Another quick question
Yes,
here.
ma'am.
It says the bad debt must be written off as an operating loss and may not be absorbed by the nonprofit school food service account. What is the nonprofit school food service account? This is the first I've heard of this. Is it Bright Futures?
It's the school nutrition fund that we're going to talk about shortly.
Okay.
How much is a meal?
A student lunch at elementary, it's $2.60, and then at the high school, it's $2.85, and every breakfast is $1.40.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Quick question.
And I think you've kind of answered this a little bit. So, the outreach for the free and reduced lunches that you guys put forth in the packets, emails, and what have you. You talked about hardships. So, can a family, they lose their jobs, they lose their business, to Miss White's point the other day, how do they go about applying, or can they apply mid-year?
Absolutely. Anytime that you have a change in status where it's your household size or income, yes, you may certainly apply throughout the year at any time.
So that, I mean, to me, just kind of thinking through it, how does somebody verify that income? I mean, I know like at the end of the year you could do W-2s or whatever, but how does that get verified?
So we do a verification process that occurs, it starts in October and it ends by the mid-December. It is not every single application. Some of it is on the honor system. We verify 3% of the applications, and those are determined by the ones that are close to the income limits.
Yeah, to Mr. Bell's point, that's got to be time consuming on your guys' behalf as well.
It is, and we do give them many chances to respond. We do phone calls, we do emails, letters. So it is time consuming, and then once we receive it, we do have to do a special report and send that off to VDOE.
And then I guess the follow-up to that is, how successful is Frederick County at verifying that there's no longer a hardship and that student can go ahead and pay full price for lunch or what have you? You know, like you just brought up, you know, there might be a temporary situation in this building, you know, but they get back up on their feet, you know, and they want to come off. Or do we verify periodically I hate to pester people in a hard time, but, you know, this is still tax dollars we're talking about, and I just want to make sure we're doing our due diligence to see, hey, how's everything coming? Are you guys able to get back on the program?
So, I won't say most, but some people do contact our office. If not, we do have reports that we know somebody who has happened to complete that mid-year. You know, some people are more forthcoming than others about their situation. So again, we don't try to, as you said, pester too much. But we do reach out to those families because we do want to make sure they are receiving the benefits that they need, and that continues.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
One more question regarding the free and reduced lunch. It's my understanding that's a federal program.
It is a federal
And
program.
I did just a beta test to go click on the link, and I was curious what kind of form this was. So from Mr. Atkins' question, I was under the impression that when someone fills out that form and they hit submit, it goes to the federal government. Their W-2, their income is verified via those means. But it sounds like you're doing that in your office.
So we verify, it's only 3%. It's not every application.
So you just keep quality control, if
Yes,
you will, pick
yes.
3%.
Yes, and it is a random selection. Our office does not select that 3%. We use an accounting and program. It's Cafe Enterprise and Cafe Accounting, and they work together, and they provide the names of the families that we should verify.
Okay. Oh, interesting. Thank you.
Yes. This shows the components of a federal reimbursable meal. In order to receive federal reimbursement, these items must be placed on the student's tray. So we do have offer versus serve. So it is up to the students. If they don't want the apple that day, if they like oranges better, they can select orange, or, you know, strawberries and blueberries, whatever we may have. The main thing is they do have to select a fruit or a vegetable. And we are trying to instill a healthy lifestyle for the students. and I will go back, yes, if a student, let's say that they don't like what we offer that day as far as any of the fruit, to go through the line, they do have to have it on their tray. But then we have what we call a share table. That's just right around the corner, and they can place that on the table. Another student can say, you know what, I really love the apples that day. I'm going to take another one because after school I'm going to eat it on the bus or whatever. So it's not wasted. We try to eliminate waste as much as possible. We all know food is expensive, and we also try to serve the students things that they like. We really amped up our fruits and our vegetables this year, especially in season. We had peaches, we had nectarines, we had plums. We had some students who had never even tasted some of those items before, so we were delighted to be able to offer that to them.
Madam Chair, with regards to this, if they decide they don't want one of those items, they can't go and get a Pop-Tart. Is that correct?
No.
Just wanted to make that public.
Yes.
Nothing wrong with Pop-Tarts, but, you know.
So now we'll talk about CEP, which I know you have heard a lot about. It is a non-pricing meal service option for schools and school districts in low-income areas. That means our schools serve breakfast and lunch at no cost to all the enrolled students without collecting household free and reduced applications. Our federal formula is used to determine whether the amount reimbursed is at the higher federal free rate or lower federal paid rate. And I do have another slide with that formula. Is Frederick County required to go CEP? So we can determine whether that participation in CEP is financially viable or not. If it is not, we can do a waiver. And that's really the next few slides on the information on why and how. We do have some bills that are in, well, one was tabled, that was House Bill 686. As far as I know, Senate Bill 283 is still alive, correct, Caitlin? Okay. And that is going to be universal meals for the whole state of Virginia. We do have several states who have already adopted that, and we're hopeful that that will come to Virginia.
Madam Chair, if I may, Senate Bill 283 came out of committee today.
It did come out of committee.
It was, everybody voted yes. Nobody voted no. So that's good news.
That is great news.
And what does that mean for this program, the CEP?
So from my understanding from VDOE is that we still participate in CEP, so we still get those federal dollars back if a school is eligible for CEP. And then the remainder of that would be paid at the paid rate is actually paid by the state.
So we wouldn't be paying 2.2 million from the county?
Correct.
But we would be paying, if that Senate bill doesn't go through, we would be paying the 2.2 million and hoping for the reimbursement from Senate Bill 283, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Yeah, of course. Can't get it for free.
What are some of the benefits of CEP? We know this from research and also just being in the school system and seeing our own students. They're better learners. Attendance is better. They're willing to participate in the classroom, and it helps build lifelong healthy eating habits. It also reduces the stigma associated with those free and reduced meals. Some of the divisions that are 100% CEP currently surrounding us are Shenandoah County, Warren County, and Winchester City. Last school year, there were 85 Virginia school districts that operated at 100% CEP, so almost 2/3, and current year data will be reported in April.
Excuse me, how many school districts are in Virginia?
132.
Could you walk us through kind of the customer experience, if you will, of a student that's going through the lunch line? I know you mentioned here reduces the stigma associated with free and reduced price meals, and I was under the impression that every student went through and either and types in their code and then moves on. Like there's no cash register per se. It's just an automated system. Am I incorrect in that assumption?
Yes, so we have to have a cashier. Whether we collect cash or not, we have to have someone verify that each student does have that reimbursable meal. So it's not automated in that sense.
Okay.
They do put a PIN in, and that's whether it's CEP or not. What we have done at some of the CEP schools, because participation has grown so much at breakfast, and we have a very limited time to get those students off the bus into the cafeteria and into the classroom, we have went to some tallies. And that is acceptable for the state's purposes.
Okay. So if I were a student, if Daryl and I were in line, and Daryl was a free or reduced lunch student, and I wasn't, but I'm behind him, does it take longer to process a free and reduced lunch student than it does? What I'm getting at here is, do the students realize that an individual is on that plan?
So kids are pretty wise.
Right.
And if you have the same thing, then they may not. But if there's a student and it's, they want an extra entree, or they want something a la carte, like a bag of chips or ice cream or something like that, and that kid is able to get it. And I'll use Mr. Bell, sorry, and maybe he is on free and reduced lunch, and he's not able to get that, then kids kind of figure that out, like, okay, Mr. Bell never gets any a la carte items. He never,
Okay, that hasn't changed in 23 years. So, okay, thank you.
Yes.
So if there's a free and reduced lunch student and he's a football player and he wants an extra entree, he cannot get it.
Correct.
Wow, I didn't know that. Thank you.
Yes.
I should be on reduced lunch. But to this point, being a teacher in a school, I can tell you that my students know exactly who are getting the free and reduced lunch. And to the point where they're not making fun of them, but they're offering to buy them additional food if they want it, or give them off of their own platter or plate or whatever you want to call it. So the awareness is there for sure. And two, with the sharing table, you're certainly going to see, the students know everything that's going on around them, except when you ask them a question. But they'll know that some of these kids who are going up there are free and reduced. So.
Agree. Any other questions? Okay. We had a phone call, this was last week, a parent who was confused because their elementary age student goes to Evendale, which is a CEP school. Their other student is a middle school student who goes to Byrd, and just couldn't understand why that one had to pay while the other one didn't. And those are some of the questions and calls that we do have to field. We do put that information out on our social media sites and also on our website. Unfortunately, some parents do miss that, and they start incurring this debt, and we do the emails. And that's how she was notified of her debt, and was just calling to see what could be done. And that's just one instance of some of the stories that we do hear. Our participation under CEP has increased. If you take a look at Jameswood Middle School, and I point them out because they are our only middle school. Before CEP, they were at 51%, and after CEP, they're at 63%. That's a pretty big growth, especially for middle schoolers. What we have seen traditionally is that each level that the students go up, participation decreases. So if you would look at high school, it decreases more so. We're really happy with those elementary participation. If you look at Evendale, Indian Hollow, Middletown, we're really getting up there. Stonewall has been very consistent with 72%. If we take a look at the next slide with breakfast, that one I think is even more showing what CEP can do. Students are starting their day with an actual meal. We're very happy about that. Evendale went from 37% to 50%. We see something similar at Indian Hollow. Our principals are on board with what we call either breakfast in the classroom or grab and go. So the students are able to get that, go to their classroom, get some nourishment, and start their day.
Just a side question, more for Dr. Hummer. Dr. Hummer, it's my understanding James Wood Middle School is currently our highest performing middle school academically. Did I remember hearing that in one of our conversations, or did I hear incorrectly?
They're up there, yes.
Okay.
Yes. I'm looking at Dr. Angelo. Yeah. Yes.
Participation increases when meals are free. Meals were free of charge from March 2020 to June 2022 under the national waiver. They were reimbursed by the federal government. Prior to this time, our student participation in the lunch program was around 49% division-wide. By June 2022, our student participation in the lunch program had grown to about 60%. That's what we're seeing similar with CEP.
Is there a reason for that?
Because the meals were free.
Just because the meals were free?
Mm-hmm. What does CEP provide? So the proposed $2.2 million is an estimate for feeding the students who will be participating in the CEP program. Now, not all students will participate. We see that now in our 9 CEP schools. We'd love to see 100% participation, but that just doesn't happen. We still have those students who will choose to pack for whatever reason, whether it's, just particular taste or what have you. So we are not making 14,000 breakfast and 14,000 lunches every day. We're still using our production records. We're still anticipating how many students will eat.
Madam Chair, if I may. This is a question for Dr. Hummer, actually, I think.
Yes, sir.
So let's say, you say this is an estimate, and let's say the proposed amount goes over the 2.2 million. Where does the additional money come from?
We would have to take a look at the nutrition fund. We would have to determine if there were additional dollars in other locations, just like if we budgeted for anything. I mean, if we budgeted for a certain amount of mileage or gas and we went over that mileage for gas, we would have to determine if moving those dollars from another location.
So that's feasible.
It's feasible, right? There's definitely a lot of different examples that we have in a day-to-day operation of running a public school system where if we do go over those dollars, there are additional modalities and procedures, and I'm sure Mrs. Cameron, Mrs. Anderson can dive into to avoid those. They like to prepare ahead in regards to, we were talking the other day about cost savings with turnover savings and those other aspects, so we work those in to avoid these types of situations. If there is a significant underestimating of a project, we would definitely have to go downtown to request those additional dollars. But we would probably never have that happen, I would like to say. And yeah, so it's a great question, but we try to avoid those things. Yes.
And in that same vein, what do we do with the additional? What do we do with the money that's additional? Let's say the estimate was an overshoot, and we only spent 1.8 million.
So when we put together, that's a great question, Mr. Bell. So when we put together our budget, keep in mind there is many aspects to this that is in regards to projections, in regards to where we're getting money from the state. There's a lot of different things that are factored into that. At the end of every year, we have to be above what we projected for our budget, or we are all going to be wearing orange jumpsuits, and we want to avoid that. Okay? So at the end of every year, we have a dollar amount that is what's called the overage. And then what we do is we put a request together to say, all right, with this overage, this past year it was 800,000 roughly, all said and done. closer to 1 million, but 800,000. We put together a request of what we would like to, how we would like to utilize those dollars, and for the school board has to approve that. We brought it downtown, and they say yes or no to that. Now, what the county could do is they could say, no, we're going to keep these dollars, and you can't spend those dollars, which in my tenure I've never seen, but sometimes that can happen based on how much those dollars are over. Now, if we've ever had a large chunk of money, and I know Mrs. Camry, again, Ms. Anderson can chime in on this, if every year we're $5 million, $6 million, we have a problem. And we were going to have a more sit-down conversation. We like to be within the 800,000, 1.5 million. That's kind of that sweet spot we like to be in. Because as you asked earlier, Mr. Bell, there's things that come up that we cannot predict.
For sure.
They're going to happen. But there's also things that would happen where we might not have spent as much as we thought we would.
Right.
So we always have that conversation at the end. So that is a fantastic question. But can I go in, Madam Chair, if I may, because you asked a good question earlier, is say if we go into this and we project the 2.2 million and then the state says, you know, we're going to fund this. So then what we're going to do is we now are going to receive essentially, hypothetically please, $2.2 million from the state. We can't just take that money and use it for something else. We have to go downtown and say, hey, we received these additional dollars. Can we use them for A, B, and C? Or as a school board, do we want to say, thank you, county, for giving us this money. You don't have to send us that because the state already sent it. So we will have those conversations. But regardless, we can't just spend those additional dollars. We need permission from the locality to spend those dollars.
Thank you.
Mrs. Camry, Ms. Anderson, did I miss anything there? Okay.
Very helpful.
Great question. Great
Very
question.
helpful. Thank
Yes,
you.
sir. Mm-hmm.
One quick clarification. I think there's a lot of misinformation out there in the community. I know a lot of the headlines in the newspapers have said, you know, free lunch and free breakfast for all for 2.2 million, and that is not the case. It's my understanding that by my math, about 58% of the 14,495 students would be fed. That's what we're budgeting for, if you will, with that 2.2 million. So really, we're not budgeting to feed every child. We're budgeting to feed 58% of our student population.
From what we've seen in the past, yes, that is the amount of the student population that would take advantage of this.
And that's based off the data, thankfully, that we had during COVID for a baseline.
Yes.
So we had the baseline before COVID ESSER funds.
Yes.
And now, and yes, I'm repeating my questions, Ms. Cameron and Ms. Anderson, that I asked you earlier. I want it in public forum, though. So
Yes.
I'm very data-driven, and
Yes.
if there is a data-driven reason to spend money, then I'm all for it. So
Right.
what I'm seeing is we had, before COVID,
Mm-hmm.
and we had, I believe you said, before COVID, we had 49% of our students taking advantage of the free and reduced lunch. Was that it?
Yes.
Okay, 49%. And then we had the ESSER funds from COVID, that bumped it up to 60%. So we are essentially trying to capture those families that are currently in distress for whatever reason that may just be above that federal funding limit in this
Yes.
initiative.
Yes.
Okay. So the 2.2 million is to cover that gap, essentially those kids that slide through the gap.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Didn't you say earlier that you didn't turn any students away, whether they had money or not, that you gave them lunch?
That is true. But then that would go into their meal debt expense, like as far as their account. Yes, they would still it gets charged to their account. Now, whether the parent pays that or not, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't.
Are there students that just don't eat, don't want to?
There are students who don't eat for multiple reasons. Maybe they already understand their parents' financial circumstances and they make that decision themselves not to eat and incur that debt. Are there students who just choose not to eat all day for another reason? Possibly.
Perhaps. And are there students that just bypass lunch because they want to keep the money? Probably.
Maybe. I think that would be very few.
Okay. So that 200 and some thousand, that debt, that's what you're talking about with the students that you gave lunch to, but they didn't pay.
Correct.
If I may, just to your question, Linda, I can tell you from my own children that I'm not in a free and reduced lunch, and I'm grateful for not being. However, if my daughter, and it's my daughter more than my son, wants an ice cream and she doesn't have money, they give it to her, because I find out on my little account, and then I have to pay that.
Right.
Then I have to have a conversation with my daughter. And unfortunately, not all parents are doing that, and not all parents are paying for it. So it's a problem.
I will say we do not do that with a la carte items. We're not giving students chips and ice cream. What this is, an actual meal,
Just a
an
meal.
actual reimbursable meal.
Okay.
So
So
then I
they're-
guess my question would be, I'm sorry, I'm all over the place, would be that amount that's lost, the 285,000 or whatever the amount was, does that not include those students who have accrued a debt and not paid it based on the cafeteria giving them the à la carte items?
No, it's only reimbursable meals.
Thank you. I didn't
Yes.
realize that.
Yes,
And
it is
so
not
my
à la
question
carte
doesn't- or
items.
My answer doesn't matter. I appreciate that. Thank you. I didn't realize that.
Certainly.
So I want to make sure I'm hearing all this correctly.
Yes.
If we approve all 21 schools for CEP, will that also cover the extra ice creams, all of that? None whatsoever? Okay, so
No.
will those be removed from the cafeterias? Like, how will that be managed?
We will not remove them, so that is a way to help with our fund as far as the students who do buy those à la carte items, and we're talking like bottles of water. It does have to be a Smart Snack approved item. So it could be a Rice Krispie treat, a small portion size of it. Those will not be removed, but those will help the school nutrition fund.
So we're still, CEP, hypothetical CEP for all 21 locations. We will still have cash registers. We will still have people to process those à la carte items. How will we just continue business as usual as far as Mr. Bell getting the email from you with his daughter buying the ice cream? And I mean, he will reimburse that cost, of course, but other parents will not. So
No, because an à la carte item is a choice. So if you come through and you don't have any money on your account, they do not sell that to you.
I see.
So it's only an actual true meal where you have your protein, your grain, your fruit, your
Don't
milk.
put any money on her account.
My daughter gets away with too darn much. I'll tell you that much right now.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Yes, ma'am, yes.
Oh, I put a limit.
And I will tell you, just from a personal experience, I have two children. I have a daughter who's in high school, a son who's in middle school. They go to a division that's fully CEP now. My daughter has, from kindergarten, has probably eaten 5 meals total, and she's a junior. My son will eat every single thing that you put in front of him. So he's thrilled with CEP. So to answer that, like, why don't some of those students eat? Sometimes it's just, they prefer to pack. But we're really talking about those families who miss that threshold. And to be honest, there are several. And whenever we get those manual applications and we're processing them and we see that, it's $100 or less, we are triple checking, making sure, like, okay, is this correct? Because we know it's a financial burden.
Thank you.
Here is the formula that I spoke about earlier. This is what the USDA gives us to use and how they calculate what they call ISP, or Identified Student Population. Those students are what we call directly certified. That comes from a file from the Department of Social Services. Those students have been receiving some type of benefit, whether it's SNAP, maybe they're foster or something. Sometimes Medicaid is part of that as well. And with this calculation, they're looking at if a school still accepted household applications, probably 60% of that population would qualify. That's where the 60% comes from. And that's why they use the multiplier. If you take a look at our schools, how they qualified, because we do have 9 currently that are CEP. Sorry, my eyes are getting blurry. Stonewall, they have been CEP for a couple of years. They are now at 49% ISP. That may increase whenever we report our numbers for this April. And the way they calculate that is they take the number of students who have been directly certified and then divide that into your enrollment. The reimbursable rates for this year for free lunch, we receive $4.25 back for every lunch that is considered free. And then we receive 40 cents reimbursement for a paid lunch. So basically, whenever they look at that multiplier and they figure out, let me just go back. So if we look at the example, 56.3 identified students, you multiply that by 1.6, they're looking at 90% of the meals reimbursed at the free rate, which would be the $4.25, and then 10% at the paid rate. Do you all have any more questions? Do you have any more questions? All right, I'm going to give it back to Kristen.
Okay, so up to this point, we've been talking about the operating fund, so now we're going to make the transition to the school nutrition fund. So our school nutrition fund is a nonprofit governmental account that holds revenues specific, they're special revenues that are specific towards the use of school nutrition operations. And the greatest amount of revenue comes from the federal government. So you can see here on the slide, currently, our operating fund subsidizes the school nutrition fund $60,000 due to negative balances on student accounts that are deemed uncollectible. And as we've been talking, $2.2 million is proposed for next year so that all schools could be 100% CEP.
Ms. Anderson, can you back up one more time? The
Sure.
school nutrition fund, it's funded federal, it's federal funds?
It's predominantly funded with federal funds, yes. So the next 3 slides, we're going to get into the sources of funds for the school nutrition fund, as well as the use of those funds. And we're going to give 3 different CEP options for consideration so that you can see the changes between the three options. The first option is going to be all schools functioning as CEP, which is a $2.2 million ask of the operating fund. The second option is going to be a phase-in of 5 schools, and we chose those 5 schools based on having an ISP floor of 35%. So you can see those 5 schools there. And then, of course, business as usual.
What's an ISP?
It's called Identified Student Population. It is those individuals, the percentage of individuals in the school who are directly certified to receive free meals.
Okay.
Just to clarify here, business as usual is 1 million,
Would require 1 million, yes.
and that 1 million was baked in already to our operating budget from last year, is that correct?
It is not.
It is not,
And
so this is new.
This would be new. Last year, well, currently, the operating fund is providing $60,000. So for next year, business as usual would require $1 million, and we're going to talk through what makes up that $1 million.
Okay.
Okay? So first, let's talk about the sources of fund or the revenue side of school nutrition. you'll see the student-paid lunches and breakfast. And first of all, let me say all of these amounts are estimations based upon participation and free eligibility percentages that we know at this time. So you see student-paid lunches and breakfast, dollar amounts in the phase-in and the business as usual, because the 100% CEP, we would not be collecting meal sales from students. But now their a la carte sales, you can see, is on the line directly below it. And that's unchanged regardless of the option. You can see federal meal reimbursements are highest under the 100% CEP, and that's because the federal reimbursement rate per meal is greater than the prices we charge to a student. And then you'll see the transfer from the school operating fund, $2.2 million, $1.3 million, and $1 million. And so I'm going to go to the next slide that talks about what these funds would provide next year to help put shape to the reason why these funds are needed.
Before we go on to the next slide, just the à la carte and staff sales and then the state interest and other miscellaneous, can you talk to me about those?
Okay, so the à la carte sales are the add-ons that students are purchasing.
And we have that number from just historical data?
Correct.
Okay. And then state interest and other miscellaneous?
So the school nutrition fund earns interest.
Interest, okay.
Yes. And then state provides some additional incentive monies to help with the lunch and breakfast program.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And I do want to highlight that under the phase-in and the business as usual, the student-paid lunches and breakfast, we've already factored in a 10-cent increase to our prices for next year. So let's look at the use of those funds. So you'll notice salaries and fringe benefits for all three options includes the 6.6% salary initiative for classified staff, as well as a 10% health insurance increase. But what's different in salaries and fringe benefits in the 100% CEP column is we would need to add 3.6 additional school nutrition workers to effectively and efficiently serve the additional meals that we are projecting when all meals are free. Services, supplies, and bad debt, you'll notice, is higher in the phase-in and business as usual because we would still need to cover any bad debt. And then food cost is the greatest variable cost because it's dependent upon the number of meals that we project to serve as well as inflation. We've all experienced inflation in our food costs. So you can see it's highest under the 100% CEP option because we are projecting to serve more meals under that option. And then capital outlay are one-time in nature kinds of equipment purchases. What's included in the 100% CEP is carts for our schools to effectively and efficiently provide grab-and-go breakfast for all of our students. And again, that would be a one-time purchase. So you can see then total expenditures by option, and then I want to draw your attention to the ending fund balance. The amounts that are represented there are 3 months of operating expense, which is a best business practice that we keep on hand. And that helps us to respond to any equipment failures or any other emergencies that may happen, as well as address any participation drops that we could potentially see. So that's how we arrive to the transfer amounts in each of the options from the school operating fund. $2.2 million, $1.3 million under a phase-in, and $1 million business as usual to cover the increased costs, as well as maintain a healthy fund balance. Oh, there we go. I guess
The
so.
end.
Okay, I'm going to jump to a slide. These are some performance indicators that we monitor on a regular basis regarding our school nutrition fund to make sure that it stays in the healthy range. So you can see by all three options the number of breakfasts and lunches that we are predicting to serve. And you'll notice meals per labor hour, that's our measure of productivity. In all three options, it's on target. And then the federal funds per converted meal, you'll notice that we get more federal dollars on a per meal basis under the 100% CEP option. Again, because the federal reimbursement rate is higher than the prices that we charge. And then you see our labor cost per meal goes down in the 100% CEP option, so we gain some efficiencies there. And you'll see the difference in the full-time equivalent positions. The 100% CEP asks for 3.6 additional school nutrition workers. And then you'll see the participation percentages that we are assuming based upon historical trends and the translation of the number of students that could potentially serve or will potentially serve.
Where'd you come up with these figures? Are they just kind of guesses?
They're based on historical data and
What historical data? Where'd you get it from?
so it's based on the number of students by school who are participating in our breakfast and school lunch program
Across Frederick County?
by each individual school, and then the statistics of who's eligible for free and who's not.
And so you know that it's going to be 6,666 for, 1,462, 100% CEP by historical records?
It's our best guess based upon data that we have accessible to us, yes. I know it's a lot of information to digest, a lot of numbers. Welcome to finance.
That's a good pun.
I'm sorry?
That was a good pun.
And certainly, if you think of more questions after the fact, certainly let us know, and we'll be happy to get those questions answered for you. So do you want to pause for a minute, or are you ready to move on to the next topic?
I do have a quick question. As far as the individuals who, I know that no student is ever turned away for a breakfast or lunch. Anecdotally, do you see repeat kids every day coming back? Or like, is it one-off? Are they one-offs? Are they kids that teachers and administrators have noticed that perhaps there's a season in their life where their families are going through something, where there's a few months where they take advantage and they go through and get a free lunch? Do we have any data or any kind of idea of what the profile of this student is?
So I would say the majority of the students are coming through. I don't think a lot of it's temporary. I think that these are things that are happening in their home throughout the school year, where they're not able to afford the meals. And I know that the teachers, the administrators, they know, because they see these students every day, that they are helping these students with, bright futures and snacks and different things like that as well. When I say we, our staff in the cafeterias do a very good job of trying not to single any student out, but they know. I have cafeteria managers who will take their own personal money and help a student. We were talking about a football player, who may want a second entree because they're leaving right after school and going to football practice. Mm-hmm. So they do recognize those students. I can tell you in the school system that they are very helpful to those students and try their best.
Okay.
Yes, yeah. I think they are recognized, and I do think that it's not just a temporary setback for most.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll move on. What we're going to finish today is the transportation requests and safety and security. So then by the end of today, we have covered everything in the operating fund for Dr. Hummer's budget. So in the transportation request, we had 2 buses. They're about $130,000 apiece. They used to be $100,000, which made everything nice and easy with all the zeros, but now they're up to $130,000 once COVID hit. So the lifespan of a bus is anywhere from 15 years or 200 to 250,000 miles. So we've given you our buses that we have by year and by mileage. So you'll see with any buses over 250,000, we've got 22. And as far as anything over 20 or 15 years, we've got about 107 buses. We're trying to get these 2 in the operating fund because we currently have 6. That means they're recurring dollars every year. This would give us 8 recurring buses every year. And we should be around 13, and it's almost getting higher because we're not addressing as many buses. We should have at least 13, and it could go up to as much as 16 in the next couple of years that we need to be replacing.
Am I correct in saying that we have several buses that are 1996 models?
Oh, I'm sure we do. I'm sure we do.
I drive a 1997 work car. It's hard to find parts, so.
Got it.
They're getting on up there.
It's funny because we also have buses that set aside, maybe they've got rust, that they use parts to get parts off of because it's hard to find the parts as well. So we try to scrimp and save and use everything we can. So that's the transportation request. There where you see where the 2 replacements will then give us anywhere 13 that we're striving for. We've been trying to build 2 in every year for the last several years, so we're getting there. And then safety and security, this is a new department for us. So we're trying to put at least $100,000 in that department to help address some of the intruder locks or some cameras that are needed. I'm sure that Mr. Conlon would love a lot more money than that, but this is a starting point.
Question, if I may. For this equipment purchase, the intruder locks on interior doors, is this covering every door in every school for the county, or is this, how many is this covering?
I think it was somewhere around,
They're about $600 a lock. So our goal is to go school by school, doing complete schools at a time, starting with our most vulnerable populations, which of course are our elementary, primary grades, and then moving up from there or other facilities. So 100,000 divided by 600, what's that, 130, 150?
I teach civics, I'll take your word for it.
Something like that. It's late. Sorry about that, but almost 1,000. It'd be 100 if it was 1,000 apiece. So it's more than 100.
And I guess, I assume the same thing with the cameras. It's just,
I stand corrected. It's 166.67.
you're fired.
and she's not even in finance. Isn't that great? And lastly, we're here now, we're going to switch off operating in the budget, but I'll pause here in case there's any questions with CEP, with transportation, with safety and security, before we switch a little gear here. Good?
Can I add a clarifying comment? We have about 26 buses that are set aside for parts and other things. We're working through those. We probably, over the summer, will determine a way to eliminate many of those that are no longer used for parts, maybe leaving about 6 available that still have parts. And remember, very old buses probably do not have very many parts we can use. Parts have become difficult. Some of those parts are more available than they used to be, but some are very hard to find. I think in the presentation we gave earlier, we have 50 some odd buses that are set aside for replacement buses. Those buses are not used for parts. Those buses could be called up when a couple tires blow on a bus or something like that. They're fully operational set-aside buses, which probably is about 15% of our fleet, which are used almost all the time. So we do have buses available when buses break down, but when you run that many buses in a day, it takes a lot of people and a lot of buses, plus extra buses, extra routes sometimes for coverage. So there are a lot of moving parts to transportation.
Moving parts, transportation, moving, got it.
Again with the puns.
Brings jokes. I love it.
She's digesting, he's moving.
I know.
Gosh, I got nothing. Okay. So we'll move to the contract award that we're requesting you approve to take to the full board. So what we're asking is for our building automation systems. We're trying to get a contract of $2 million and award that to Siemens Industry. This $2 million is only federal dollars that we're using. This is through ESSER 3 funds. So we're requesting the $2 million to cover anything we purchase from now until September 30th when that money runs out. We've already awarded 3, but they were under the threshold of what you needed to approve, so they were under Dr. Hummer's signing that we've done the last several months. But we thought since now we're looking at finishing out ESSER funds. We probably need one complete contract award that covers all of them. So we're asking your approval to move to the full board.
What did we do without those ESSER funds?
I know, right? Because we also did HVAC systems.
Depends on the people like we always have.
And then the last slide is just letting you know, we do have a new budget development calendar out on our website under the board docs. And we just highlighted some dates that changed, that we got some new information. So just to draw your attention to that.
Can you go back to the calendar? I'm sorry.
You're disappointed there's not more meetings on there, Mr. Bell?
Yeah.
Finance meeting the 20th.
Why don't we have one every day? No, actually, I had a question about the Finance Committee meeting, budget work session that's tentative for April 4th, which is during spring break. Correct?
I don't think so. I don't think it is. Is it for us?
Isn't spring break?
That's correct.
Yeah, it's correct.
Oh, it is. Yikes. Okay. Well, Dr. Hummer, you want to take that off the board and not let us be off on April 4th? Well, then we'll change that to be as close to April 10th as we can.
Yeah, we can adjust as you see fit. We will be working that day, sir, so we can definitely move things around. I do, Madam Chair, if I may, the 11th and the 16th meetings are going to be contingent on April 10th, because that's when the Board of Supervisors will be meeting. If that gets shifted or adjusted, then of course we will have to have a conversation of moving our meetings around as well. And then we can have a conversation about April 4th. These meetings are all established ahead of time, so if we need to adjust them, we can.
Yeah, we do have tentative on those, but we also need to get calendars to align things, so yes.
2:30,
Okay.
30?
And Dr. Hummer, you want to wrap it up?
Can you go back to that slide? I want to make sure Mrs. Martin gets those written
Oh,
down.
I'm sorry. It is on board docs, the full calendar.
And
So-
April the 4th. They're all
That's
4:30.
tentative. So, Madam Chair, with that, we do have one item we would like to go to the full board for approval for consideration, and that is the approval of the $2 million for the Siemens project.
Excellent. May I have a motion for to move forward to the full board, the Building Automation System Services in the amount of $2 million for the Siemens project?
Do I have to say all that?
Madam Chair was very thorough, so you may say so moved.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
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 No opposed? All right, and with that, the motion passes. And it looks like that is the last thing on our agenda. May I have a motion for adjournment?
I move we adjourn this meeting.
I second.
And any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, and the motion passes. I adjourn this meeting at 7:25.